Perfect. So wonderful. Again, thank you so much for joining, everyone. And I'm so glad that you're here. As we are getting started, as I mentioned before, please feel free to introduce yourself and where you're calling in from. I mentioned that the session will be recorded. Lines are on mute, but I will open up the lines at times during the presentation today, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. I've kept these sessions intentionally small so we can have interaction, dialogue, and to be sure that you have the opportunity to ask any questions of me that you may have. So today, what we're doing today is actually exploring the power of pause. And this is not like a luxury or an add-on, but it's actually a way of leading and living with intention. So most of us have been taught that staying busy, right, is the way to stay afloat, to keep going, to don't stop, to don't fall behind. But in my work and in my own life, I've learned actually something profoundly different. The pause and taking a pause isn't the opposite of performance. The pause is the fuel that makes our performance sustainable. So, what we're going to do during our time together today is look at how tiny moments of pause or planned breaks in our rhythm or even larger life transitions all shape our energy, our clarity, and the way we show up, not only for ourselves, but for others around us. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. And before I get there, I will actually introduce myself. So I am Johanna Danaher, and my company is called Anchor to Aspire. It is a coaching organization that is really focused on supporting individuals achieve their personal growth goals. And I bring a real deep foundation of experience in working in pharmaceutical HR for 25 years. And in that role, I led career growth and talent management and culture for the organization I was with. So a lot of the work that I've done has been really about how do we operationalize our life, right? But also how do we actually bring our best selves to everything that we do? So my philosophy is very much about the fact that we all have everything we need within ourselves, and it's just about how do we unlock that potential to truly step into our greatness. That's just a little bit about me. And what we'll be doing during the rest of our time together is really talking about these four areas. We'll start by grounding in what we actually mean by pausing beyond just taking a break. We'll explore three types of pauses: micro pauses in your day, seasonal pauses that can help reset your rhythm, and life level pauses that arrive during those big transition moments. I'll connect this to what we know from research about micro breaks, mindfulness, and breathing practices. And we'll actually have time to experience three different types of pauses during this time together. So it's not just theory, it actually becomes embodied practice. And we'll also have some time for you to all ask questions of me. And will I be able to leave with a tangible shift in what you might want to try in the next week or so? Okay, so let's dive in. And we're actually going to start with our first experiential pause because before every beginning, there is a pause. And this is a very simple arrival practice. And really for the next, 60 seconds to 2 minutes, there's nothing that you need to do or to produce. And we'll take this experiential pause. I call it the arrival grounding pause. So I'll walk you through what this looks like. We'll experience it together. So if it's comfortable for you, place your feet on the floor, both feet flat on the floor. Let your shoulders and your jaw soften just a bit. Take some of that pressure off of your body. You can close your eyes or you can soften your gaze if that feels comfortable for you. Begin to notice your breath. No need to change how you're breathing, just notice the rhythm. And as you're breathing, quietly ask yourself, what am I arriving with today? What's my energy like? Just notice. No need to fix anything, to change anything, or to judge anything. You may be arriving with fatigue or curiosity or stress, hope, distraction. All of it is welcome. Now take 3 slow breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. We'll stay here for about 60 seconds, just breathing and noticing. I'll watch the time, so just breathe. 3 breaths in and out. Now, whenever you're ready, gently bring your attention back to the room. Now, that was our first micro pause. And I'm curious for those of you who are in the chat, we just had a micro pause. For those who have just joined us, welcome. We just finished our first micro pause as we joined the opportunity today, which was a grounding arrival exercise. And I'm curious for those who have been with me, if you have any comments on how did that feel, feel free to post that in the chat. And I'll continue to move forward. So feel free again. How did it feel as you were focusing in on your breathing and asking yourself, what am I arriving with today? What is my energy feeling like? And did that exercise, that arrival grounding, give you the opportunity to release anything? Again, feel free to post any of your comments or your thoughts in the chat. Now, as we move forward, what I want to do is keep this concept of energy at the center of our conversation. And it's important that we have a common definition of energy. And our simple definition is the capacity to do work. So energy is that capacity. When you have more energy, you have more capacity to think, to care, to decide, to create, to support others. But what we often overlook is how that capacity is built and renewed. We try to squeeze more out of ourselves, right, without refilling our tank. And pauses, what we're here to talk about today, pauses of all different kinds are one of the most effective ways we have to renew that capacity physically, emotionally, mentally, and even in terms of meaning and purpose. So when I talk about pause, we're actually talking about how you expand, protect, and replenish your capacity. And why is that important? Right? This slide actually captures a story that I think many of us may be feeling, or many of us have absorbed as true, that work and life are actually in competition. And if we believe that they're battling for the same limited resources, time, energy, attention, then taking a pause can feel risky. It can feel like we're losing ground in one area just to show up in another. But what if we shifted that? What if instead we saw pause as a bridge between all of these roles? A moment that lets your nervous system reset so that when you move from one meeting to the next or from work to home, you're not dragging that same overloaded state with you, but you're actually arriving as yourself, fully energized. Because life really isn't meant to be a zero-sum game. We're not supposed to succeed at work instead of family or community or self. The goal is to move among all of these roles that we carry in a way that's truly sustainable. And pauses, whether they are those micro pauses that we take, or they're seasonal pauses, or life level pauses, help us keep all four of these in view. Those micro pauses I've talked about help us reset. Seasonal pauses give us time to rebalance. And life pauses ask us to re examine what we want our life to look like. Without pause, we tend to overinvest in one area and quietly deplete all of the others. And so when I talk about energy, I'm actually talking about energy management, right? And how pause is more than a productivity hack. It's really about expanding, renewing, and using our energy wisely. And taking a pause in real time is really one of the most practical and positive ways to do that, is to really recoup our energy. Research on pause, from the short breaks that are about 30 seconds to 5 minutes, shows that these pauses can improve our vigor, they can reduce fatigue, they can support task performance when they're used intentionally. I often hear, clients that I've worked with say, I don't have time to pause. But the science actually suggests the opposite. We don't have time not to. Well-placed pauses can help us show up more focused, more grounded, and more effective in all areas of our life. So up to this point, we've talked about energy as the capacity to do the things that matter to us. This slide here adds another layer. Energy just isn't one thing. There are at least four dimensions at play, and probably more, but the ones we'll focus on today are about physical, right? Sleep, movement, hydration, food, all of the things you've probably thought about when you think about your energy and how you fuel yourself. But there's also emotional energy, how you're feeling, and how you relate to those feelings. There's mental energy, which is your ability to focus, to prioritize, and to think clearly. And there's spiritual energy or purpose energy, right? This is the sense of meaning and the why behind the why behind what you do, right? Why do you do the things that you do? And when you feel off, it's rarely just one of these, right? You might be mentally sharp, but emotionally drained, or deeply connected to purpose, but physically exhausted. And most of us try to fix our energy by pushing harder in one area, usually in the mental space, without noticing what's happening in the others. So, in a moment, we're going to talk about pause and the different types of pauses you can take. And what I want you to keep in mind as we go into the next set of information is the most effective pauses are the ones that tend to more than one dimension at a time. So a short walk outside could be physical, emotional, and mental. A long vacation can reset your body and clear your head. Or a big transition in your life can invite deep questions about purpose. For now, just notice which one of these four dimensions feels neglected for you lately. And that will be important as we sort of move into the next, set of slides and next set of information here. So as we move on, what I want to highlight here, and I think if you're going to take anything away from the conversation today, it's this slide. To perform at our best in any area of our life, we must balance energy expenditure with intermittent energy renewal. And what does that really mean? We need to pause. So most of us are really good at the expenditure part. We spend energy all day long, thinking, deciding, caring, producing, responding. Where we struggle is in the renewal part. If you're anything like me, you wait for the big vacation or for the weekend or for a future season sometime down the road when things will calm down. And in the meantime, we're running a constant energy deficit. So this sentence is the shift. It says that renewal is not optional if we care about our performance. It also says that renewal needs to be intermittent, woven into the day, the week, and the season, not just one big crash at the end. So the natural question then becomes, well, what does that actually look like in real life? And that's where this concept of pausing comes in. And so on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by a pause and start to break that down into practices that you can actually use. So for today's purposes, a pause is a conscious break in the flow of your day or your life. A moment where you shift from constant doing into a bit more of conscious being, a brief space where you can notice what's going on physically, emotionally, mentally, purpose wise, and then choose what comes next. What makes it a pause isn't the length, it's the intention. You're interrupting your autopilot long enough to check in with yourself. How am I really? What do I need? What matters most in this next block of time? So, on the next few slides, I'm going to walk you through three kinds of pause: micro, seasonal, and life. And you can start to see where each one might fit into your world. So we define pause as this conscious break in the flow, the moment where you interrupt that autopilot long enough. And so now I want to zoom out and show you that it's just not one thing. It actually shows up at these three different levels in our lives. The micro pauses, those tiny in the moment resets, a few seconds to a few minutes, 3 breaths before you respond to an email, a 60-second stretch between meetings, a short walk to the kitchen where you actually feel your feet on the floor, or the seasonal pauses. These are the pauses that happen over days or weeks. They're vacations, maybe a long weekend away, a sabbatical, or intentionally quieter seasons at work or at home. They let you step out of the always on and look at the bigger pattern of your life and your work. And then life pauses. These are those big crossroad moments, right? Maybe you're in a moment of a career change or a role elimination or a serious health shift. Maybe you're becoming a caregiver or an empty nester, or you're thinking about retirement. These life pauses ask deeper questions about who you are now and what you want this next chapter to feel like. All three of these matter. Micro pauses help you feel grounded and stay grounded in the day to day. Seasonal pauses help you sort of reset your rhythm, and life pauses invite you to reimagine your story. So we're going to take each one in turn so you can see where and how you might want to bring more of these into your own life. So let's start with micro pauses because these are the ones that we can experiment with right away. These are a few seconds to a few minutes. They're directly woven into your day. They don't require a calendar block or approval. They just require a moment of choice. Again, as I talked about earlier, and even as we tested when you were coming into this meeting, a micro moment or a micro pause could look like taking 3 to 5 slow breaths before you speak in a meeting or before you hit send on an important email. It could be standing up, stretching, taking a walk between back-to-back calls. How many of us have actually scheduled our day so much that we don't have any break between our calls and we're running from one thing to the next and we feel exhausted and depleted, and sometimes we don't even take a lunch, right? That happens a lot of times to many women and many in the workplace. So doing a quick sensory check-in could also be a way that you actually break that routine, right? Feeling your feet on the floor, just noticing the sounds in the room around you, maybe the bird song outside your window, or just rubbing your fingertips together and paying attention to the texture of how it feels to rub your fingertips together. These are sensory check-ins that allow us to disrupt that autopilot, and they create just enough space between a trigger and a response. So you're not operating purely on reflex. They help your nervous system shift down a notch from high alert, and they protect your focus as you move from one task or role to another. So you're not dragging the last meeting or the last conversation into the next one. So if your days feel packed and reactive, micro pauses are where I'd invite you to start. They're small, they're often invisible to others, and they start to change the feel of your day from the inside out. Now, the next are seasonal pauses. These are pauses that may happen over days or weeks. These are your long vacations. These are your maybe a long weekend away, or intentionally where you've actually quieted some of the work responsibilities that you have. It's where you step off that treadmill for a bit instead of running a little bit faster. Now, these do a few important things. They pull you out of that always on mode, right? And they give you distance from your routines. They let you see the bigger pattern of your life and your work, what's working, what's quietly draining you, and what you've simply gotten used to. They create space for you to listen before you decide. And you'll more able to hear your own voice underneath the noise when you're taking this type of a seasonal pause. Good questions to ask yourself when you're in a seasonal pause are, what's genuinely working for me right now? And what's quietly draining me that I've actually been tolerating or rationalizing? And what needs to shift so my energy is better aligned with what matters most to me? This is where a lot of those small but meaningful changes are born. Adjustments to your schedule, your commitments, your boundaries, that change how the next few months feel. This is where you relook at all the things that we've said yes to and decide, are those things that I said yes out of obligation? Or are those things that I said yes to because they truly align with what matters most to me? And they're going to fuel my energy and my joy. Now, if you can't remember the last time you truly exhaled or the last time you came back from time off actually feeling different, that's a sign that seasonal pausing might be overdue for you, or that you may need to protect it differently next time. So the next type of pause is what I call a life pause. These are the big ones. These show up, as I said before, as major transitions and turning points. For me, I recently had a couple of larger life pauses. I had a role elimination. So my position at my pharmaceutical company where I'd been for 25 years was eliminated last February. So I had this moment of a life pause, and it was a big career change where I had to really think about, what do I want next? I've also had a health diagnosis. About 15 years ago, I was diagnosed with celiac disease, an autoimmune condition that required a complete and total shift of my life. Food was now my enemy, right? I had to go into a very significant change in my diet, which really triggered some deep emotional reactions that I had. So I had to really think about, what does this mean for me and how do I want to show up in this new space? And my daughter just recently went off to college, so I became an empty nester. So that was also a shift. How do I support her in her new journey as she is growing into an amazing young woman? So how do I shift how I show up and what I provide for her, as someone walking beside her as opposed to someone who is actually leading? And so all of those moments, right, taught me that I had different questions that I needed to ask myself. It was that the routines that I had in the past that used to guide me fell away. It was very disorienting, even if it was sort of on paper looking like the change was positive, it was disorienting. And so I had to take some pause, right? I had to ask myself, who am I now beyond the role that was ending? What kind of life and what kind of energy do I want to create next? And what support do I need to cultivate around me as I navigate into this next wave? So, life pauses are rarely ones that we schedule, but they are often the most powerful. They're invitations to re anchor in your values and reimagine your direction. The micro and the seasonal pauses I just talked about can't prevent life pauses, but they can prepare us for them. When we've already had practice checking in with our body, with our emotions, with our mind, with our purpose, we have more steadiness, we have more self trust, and we can draw on that when those bigger waves of change, these life pauses arrive. All right. So the next two slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about the science of pausing, and then we're going to take a pause and actually open it up for all of you to ask some questions of me. So the first thing I wanted to do is just ground us on the fact that this isn't just all about what we're saying, right? There's actually science behind what happens in our body when we take these pauses. And the headline says it really, really clearly. Your body refuels during pause, not after burnout. Think about those micro pauses, those short breaks from 30 seconds to 10 minutes. Research on those show that even these tiny pauses can reduce fatigue and they ease some of the physical strain that builds up when you actually sit in the same position, when you stare at a screen, or you stay in go mode for too long. When you pair those breaks with slow, paced breathing, you help your nervous system shift out of constant fight or flight mode, which supports stress recovery and improves heart rate variability, which is one marker of how resilient your body is to stress. Then, when we zoom out to the seasonal pauses like vacations or the longer stretches away from work, studies associate real time away with a lower risk of heart disease and other stress related health conditions. During those periods, measures like blood pressure, muscle tension, and overall physiological strain often decrease. So this isn't just about feeling a little more rested. Your body is literally coming out of a prolonged stress response and into a more balanced state. The key here is your body doesn't magically recover after you've hit the wall, right? It recovers in the pauses that you actually take throughout the day and throughout the year. And now the science also talks a little bit about how this affects your brain, your perspective, and your work. And here you can see at the pause, any type of pause puts your brain at rest, right? When we take away all pause from our days, we shrink the space where insight tends to arise. When you're not locked in on a specific task, your brain's resting and our default networks become more active. These networks are involved in reflection and creativity. They help you connect the dots, make meaning, and imagine new possibilities. And that's why mind wandering breaks, when you go out for a walk or where you take that time to just allow your brain to just think creatively, so often those lead to insight and problem solving. The seasonal pauses, they help us gain perspective. These vacations and longer breaks don't just improve our mood, they improve well being, reduce stress, and boost satisfaction. Distance from work also helps you see patterns that you can't see when you're in the middle of everything. Those patterns show you what's working, what's not, where you might want to make a different choice. And that's a huge gift for your leadership and your decision making. And the bottom piece right here, those life pauses, they allow us to rewrite our story. After major adversity or big transition, some people experience what psychologists call post traumatic growth, right? New strengths emerge, deeper meaning is developed, closer relationships are formed. And one of the things that supports that growth is the ability to create a coherent story about what happened. Pauses, especially those bigger life pauses, give your brain the time and the space to do that narrative work. What did this change for me? What did I learn? Who am I now? What do I want to carry forward? That meaning making is strongly linked to better well being over time. So, right now, we're three-quarters of the way through our conversation, and it's time for our experiential pause number 2. This is again just a very short pause. So for 2 more minutes, I'll give you a choice. You can either move and reset or reflect and jot down. So if you're moving and you're resetting, stand up, roll your shoulders, shake out your hands, sway a bit. Let your breathing deepen naturally as you move. Or the second option is to reflect. Just grab a piece of paper and ask yourself, what's one pause that you've recently taken that's helped you? Or where is your energy asking for a reset right now? There's no right or wrong choice. Pick what your body and your mind need most. I'm going to give us about 2 minutes, and then I'll bring us back together where we'll close out with questions and with answers. 2 minutes, everyone. Okay, I think we've had just about maybe a minute, minute and a half or so. So just start to finish up. Think about coming back to the conversation. Bring yourself back into this space. So, what I'll just do is I'm going to move forward to this particular slide. And this is, again, just thinking about what we just did. These are the questions that you might be asking yourself over the course of this week, how you can actually turn today's insights into simple shifts that you can bring into your life. What type of pause do you need more of? What's one simple pause you'll test this week? What support or boundary will protect it? And then how are you going to stay committed? So, again, these are some of the questions that I would encourage you to think about and to build in for yourself. So, I'm going to pause here. I'm going to open up the microphones. If anyone has a specific question that you'd like to ask me, please go ahead and either put it in the chat or feel free to open your microphones. I think I can allow everyone to open the microphones. So I think that is allowed. So I'll open them up if you have any questions. And if not, I will go on and share some additional information. Okay, perfect. So the microphones, I think, technology's not always my friend, but I think I've allowed you to open up your microphones if you are interested in doing so. Okay. But what I'll do for the next 15 minutes, because we have a few more minutes together, is actually come back to energy and what we talked about before. And this is some of the things that I find so interesting about what happens when we pause. And I want to show you how that all plays out over a typical day, a week, or a season. And this is a simple map of where our energy tends to land and why pausing is so important. So what you see here is we have four zones. There's the performance zone, right? When we think about our energy, you're focused, you're engaged, you're using your strengths on meaningful work. You're feeling optimistic or confident or enthusiastic and resourceful. There's another zone where you might be feeling emotions that are a little bit more like irritated, angry, defensive, frustrated, impatient. We call that the survival zone. That's our fight or flight state. And then there's another zone called burnout, right? If you stay in the survival zone with those energy emotions, you tend to burn out, where you might feel insecure, stressed, helpless, sad, depressed. There's one zone that I haven't talked about here, right? That zone is called the renewal zone. This is where you're refueling, resting, reflecting, connecting, playing, and creating. And the emotions you might be feeling here are peaceful, serene, grateful, or appreciative. What happens is we dance through all four of these zones. Survival zone is very useful in a true crisis, and that could be, a crisis of something that's happening at work or at home. It's important. Renewal isn't laziness, right? It's actually what makes our performance sustainable. The problem is when we spend most of our time on this left side in survival and burnout because we haven't built in enough renewal, right? And oftentimes we are spending an awful lot of time in survival zone. We're performing, we're working at our best, something happens. We get an email, we get a phone call, something doesn't go right, whatever it might be. We burn dinner, who knows? Now all of a sudden we're in survival zone, right? If we stay too long here, which is where many of us operate from, we burn out. So the way that we actually move from survival zone or burnout zone back to performance zone is through the renewal zone. So that's what we've been talking about all day today, the importance of taking those pauses. They really help us move out of survival and burnout, through renewal, and back into performance in a way that doesn't cost you your health, your relationships, and it's sustainable. So I think the thing that is really important is this dance, to be intentional about performing and renewing, performing, and renewing so we don't end up on the left side of this chart. And the next slide will tell you, again, all four quadrants are normal and they serve you in certain situations. The goal is not to never be in survival or burnout. It's to recognize when you're there and know how to move out of there into performance and renewal. The right side here, where you see performance and renewal, is more intentional. We tend to be clearer, more grounded, and more choiceful here. And the left side is survival and burnout is much more reactive. We're driven by stress, urgency, fear, or sheer habit. And here's the line that ties all of this back to pausing. When you find yourself on the left side, the way back is through renewal. It's through pause. So everything we've talked about today will enable us to really value that pause moment that we create for ourselves, because we see that intentional dance between pausing and performing, and how taking a pause enables that capacity to do more. So our life has that sort of equal opportunity. It's not that zero-sum game that we talked about at the beginning. So right now, what I'd like to do is just say thank you very much for joining me today, and to remind you that small steps in the right direction can turn out to be the biggest steps of your life. So think about how you can intentionally create a pause for yourself today, tomorrow, and beyond, and how you can bring that to life in everything that you do. And what we're going to do at the end, we have about 4 minutes left together. So what we're going to do right now is just take an option and an opportunity for a final experiential pause. And this is a pause to listen to the music that I'll play. So I'm going to play a piece of music. During this time, nothing you need to do. I won't be having any slides. You can close your eyes. You can soften your gaze and just listen to the music and take this as your pause, as your opportunity to focus on you for the rest of the day today. So I'm going to take down the slides, and I'm going to now share the music in a moment. It's just going to take me a moment to get there. Okay. So now just bear with me for one moment while I learn how to share my computer music. And thank you so much for being a part of the conversation today. For those who are still with us, I invite you to think about how you cultivate your own pause. Thank you so much. And as I said earlier, this has been recorded. A copy of the slides will be sent along with the recording link. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.